chicken claw.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 5. Thanks for tuning back. I'm glad you all are here. So far, so good, Getting kind of a hang of this. I'm proud to say that I looked at some of the downloads. It's only been a couple of days, and proud to say that at least it wasn't 0. A couple of you actually heard. A couple of you actually tuned in, and man, that makes me happy. I'm really glad that some of you are checking this out, and I hope a couple of you learned some stuff, and I hope a couple of you had some laughs, and I hope it was entertaining, and I hope I was good company. Okay. Well, recapping the last episode, we were talking about what do we needed to get the studio going at home. We covered the basics. We need a computer. We need the hardware. We need some kind of software. And then the basics. I know we kind of went a little overboard on stands and mic cables and microphones and stuff. But it's more along the lines of so you can kind of get a gist money-wise of what this really costs, Especially if you want to record like a full drum kit. It does get kind of expensive. So, cost saving matters. Sometimes you do have to kind of think it out. And hey, maybe I don't have an extra, $500 to get this drum kit going. So maybe I do need to look at maybe some drum sequencing or other, cost saving plans to get you to the end of your project quicker. Anyway, guys, let's continue. And today we're going to be covering, the gear, outboard gear, plugins, all those magic knobs that you see at a studio. We'll cover the basics, some plugins versus outboard gear. So a lot of you, this may be, I totally know what he's talking about. This is boring. But to a lot of other guys here or girls, you may not even know what I'm talking about. Okay, plugins versus outboard gear. A plugin would be a piece or an additional piece of software that you can bring up within your DAW. Oh my God. Okay. I know that sounds like a lot. Digital audio workstation. So instead of me saying Pro Tools or Logic or, Cubase or whatever, I'll say DAW because that's what it means. Digital audio workstation. Inside a digital audio workstation, you have all these kinds of plugins. And a plugin would be a virtual representation of an outboard piece of gear. So for example, an EQ. Okay, what in the world is an EQ? I mean, you've seen EQs all your life. They're on your car radio. It usually has a treble, which would represent like the higher band of frequencies. Your mids, which would represent your mid band of frequencies, and your lows, which would, obviously represent the lower end of your frequency spectrum. So an outboard gear would kind of be the EQ that you would see in a studio. It's made in a box. It connects to power, and it has an input and an output. So whatever you would run through this EQ, you would literally plug into this box and then route out of this box into your next signal chain. And you're going to have all kinds of EQs. You're going to have a simple, couple of band EQs, like a 3-band EQ, like we discussed, that you might see on your car. Or you might see a 5-band EQ, a 7-band EQ. Usually they go all the way up to about a 31-band EQ. Now, what an EQ will do is it's going to boost, so it's going to raise, or it's going to cut, it's going to lower frequencies, regardless of whether it's an outboard piece of gear or a plugin. So an outboard piece of gear is actually a piece of hardware. It's a box. It'll be anything that can manipulate frequencies. A plugin will be a virtual version of this EQ that we're talking about. So it's probably going to look exactly like that same EQ. It'll probably have the same looking face. It'll probably have the same looking knobs. It's going to have the same looking boost and cuts. What I mean by boost and cuts is you're going to see the little trim, and it'll be like an actual lever that you raise and lower. A 7-band EQ will have like 7 little levers. You raise it higher to ask the EQ to give you more of that specific frequency, or you would lower that level so that you can ask it to please reduce a certain amount of that frequency. Okay? So now, the great part about a plugin is that they're usually free. For the most part, within these DAWs, they're all going to come with some kind of stock EQ. So the stock EQ is just something that the company for that DAW will make, and it's in there already. Great way to save some money. You can start with those EQs. Now, when are you going to use the EQ? You're probably going to use that all the time. And what you're going to want to do with the EQ is basically shape and probably reduce undesirable sounds, or probably raise characters of your sound that you want to enhance. And then obviously you also want to, use it to trim the fat. So for example, if you're doing vocals and you're recording a vocal, well, the odds are, nobody sings down there like this, it's very rare that someone has an extreme low end to their voice, So you probably would want to cut out all those undesirable frequencies, 80 hertz and down, 100 hertz and down, because really nobody is singing down there. And of course, like in the upper stratosphere, nobody's singing up there in the dog whistling range, where it's just, nobody's singing up there. So you can cut out all those, undesirable frequencies that really are not even being captured. The odds are you're probably capturing a lot of white noise. So, let's just cut those out. So, okay, quick review. So, outboard gear versus plugins. Outboard gear, an actual physical piece of hardware. So, something that you hold, it's tangible. You can adjust frequencies. It usually will require power. You plug into it, you plug out of it. A plugin is a virtual representation of the same exact thing. So just like you would have an EQ, a reverb, a delay, a compressor, de-esser, whatever the outboard piece of gear would be, the plugin would be a virtual version of that. So you could just pop it up, and there it is in your signal chain. Now, one of the great things, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. One of the great advantages of a plugin is that it's real time. So if you captured a track, whether it's a vocal, whether it's a guitar, whether it's a drum kit, whatever the case may be, when you add that plugin to that track, that plugin is real time. So in other words, it runs the track through the plugin manipulates the sound, you hear the difference, but it still keeps the integrity and the original copy and the original version of the track. So think of it as in it's non-destructive. So if one day you happen to EQ that vocal part and you added all the EQ, cuts and boosts and whatever you wanted, and then you come back the next day and you're like, hey man, I really don't like how it sounds. I wish I had done this. Well, you could just readjust your EQ or whatever plugin you're using. And at that point, the integrity of your original track has not been lost. It's still there. So you can take off the EQ and there's your track, untouched. Put the EQ back on or try a different kind of EQ, and now your track has been manipulated, but it hasn't been changed. The only thing that's changing is the processing that the plugin has caused it. Okay? So I know we kind of jumped into it with 2 feet there, talking about EQs and outboard gear versus plugins, but I just kind of wanted to give you real world examples of how this actually works. So that's EQs, whether it's outboard gear or plugins. And a lot of it depends on where you're at. A lot of times if you're doing road work and it happens to be an old analog console, or it doesn't have to necessarily be old because they still make brand new analog consoles. Let's say you are on an analog console. The odds are the EQ will probably be something tangible. It's got knobs. You can tweak it. You can move it. If you're working on a digital surface, maybe an iPad controlling your actual live mixer, the odds are it might be a plug-in version where you can adjust, but you can still adjust it the same way. You can still cut, you can still boost, same thing. All right, guys. Probably EQ is probably going to be one of the main pieces of gear that you use to manipulate your sound. Very basic. Probably the next one would be reverb. For some reason, everybody, that's the go-to. Everyone's going to want a reverb. What is reverb? Well, reverb is reverberation. What a lot of people would call echo. Basically, it's going to add ambience, or it's going to add sustainability to your sound. So, for example, on a vocal, it's going to sound like your vocal is in a big, large room with a lot of extension added to it. So your vocal will probably have, let me do a quick example. This would be my voice normal. This is me normal. Now this is me drenched in reverb. Okay. So you could hear there that my regular vocal is just, what you've been hearing. But my second vocal, drenched in reverb, has a lot of space to it. It hangs in the air quite a bit. So that's reverb. Now reverb you can shape like anything else. You can EQ it, so you can ask it for the reverb to have a lot of highs. The reverb can have mids, it can have lows, it can be extremely large. So here's an example of like a small reverb. A small reverb. Okay. Now here's an example of a ridiculously long, I'm in a cavern reverb. Reverb. Okay. So that's reverb. I mean, I know we can dive a lot deeper into it, but this is let's just get our feet wet with the very basics of what a lot of these are. Reverb. Okay. Delay. Oh man, another popular one. Delay will, in a nutshell, delay is gonna recreate your sound at a different pace after the initial sound has happened. So this would be my voice, like my normal voice with no delay. So this is me with no delay. This is me, very dry. All right, now let's add some delay. This is me with delay. You can hear how there's more of me after my tone happens. Okay, so that's delay. Funny part about it is delay, if you keep delaying your sound and you keep making more and more copies of you as your sound has happened, eventually that's how we got reverb. Delay became so close together that eventually it became just an overall sound, and from crazy delays is basically how reverb came to exist. All right, so that's once again covering the very basics: EQs, delays, and reverbs. Now the next one we're going to get into is compression. Now this one is a little more difficult to kind of wrap your head around and really how to use it effectively. Compression, it's going to be in that category of kind of a downward expander. Even though I know that you can go and you can use it as an expander, but really the majority of the people that are going to use it for suppression. Okay. What in the world does that mean? All right, guys, hang in there. So a compression would be trying to achieve uniformity of volume. So it's a volume suppressor. And this is how it works. All the compressors, whether it's an outboard gear or whether it's a plug-in, you're gonna have your threshold. And a threshold will be a knob there. And okay, what is threshold? Think of threshold as in when do you want me to start working? Now, a great thing about this next part we're going to cover, whether it's threshold or ratio or release or whatever, this is going to be the description for a lot of other outboard gear. So whether we're talking about compression, or whether we're talking about de-essers, or whether we're talking about limiters, a gate, a compressor is still going to mean the same thing. When do you want me to start working? So on a compressor, I'm going to give an example. Let's say a bass part. Say a bass, and I'm going to give just, a broad example. Say the bass is playing and it's tracking, because, we're usually in the negative fields. So let's say we're tracking, negative 25, negative 23, negative 25, negative 20. So we're in that negative 25 to negative 20 area. All of a sudden, bass jumps up. And we're going negative 25, negative 23. All of a sudden, we're hitting negative 10, negative 5. I mean, a severe jump up. Okay, so now let's get some math involved. We set our threshold at, let's say, negative 15. Okay, or even better, negative 20. So as the bass player is playing, he's doing negative 25, negative 23, negative 21. He hits negative 20. We've hit the threshold. This is when you asked me to start working. So the compressor now is engaged. What does that mean? Now the compressor is working. So how is it working? It's going to look at your ratio point. Oh my God, what's ratio, bro? What are you talking about? Ratio is by how much do you want me to decrease this volume? And ratios are like fractions. It's going to have a 1-to-1, which is 1, which means the sound is unaffected, or 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, all the way to 10-to-1. After 10-to-1, basically a compressor stops being a compressor and it becomes a limiter, another piece of outboard gear. So let's say we're at 2-to-1. So in other words, it's going to cut whatever it's inputting by half. Does that make sense to y'all? So for example, if you're doing 25, negative 25, negative 23, 21, negative 20, it's engaged. It hits negative 19. Now we're going to start to cut that in half, allowing half of that sound to be above 20. I know, it's mind-blowing. It's hard to understand. You'll get a feel for this once you finally jump into it and you actually start using it. So a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 is more of a soft compression. It's not really stomping down on your sound. Once you get 5-to-1, 6-to-1, it's really going to start to bite down on that sound. Now, what I mean by biting down, the suppression that is being caused by the compressor may cause some slight discoloration in your sound. So right off the bat, one of the things you may hear is some of the highs may be decreased as well with the volume coming down. That's the nature of compression. My God, rock music is compression. I mean, that's just how it works. That's how it's always been. Now, you pay, obviously, a lot of money, and a lot of the higher dollar compressors, whether they're outboard gear or plugins, will work on this one feature of being transparent. That's the word they'll use a lot, is, hey, when suppression of volume happens, you don't discolor that sound. Some of the highs and mids are not affected. In other words, only the volume is affected and not the actual coloring of it. So that's your compressor, your ratio as far as how much do I cut, threshold, when do you want me to start working, and then there's other knobs that'll be on the compressor. Release, attack and release. Attack will basically mean how fast do you want me to start working when I hit the threshold. Release is how quickly or how slowly do you want me to stop working once we've left the threshold area. Okay, I'm trying to use the most basic terms that we can so that you're not overwhelmed by these terms. So remember, threshold, when do you want me to start working? Ratio, by how much do you want me to start working? How much division do you want me to bring towards the downness of this volume? Attack, how quickly do you want me to start working once the threshold is achieved? Release, how fast or how quickly, how fast or how slowly do you want me to stop working once I leave the threshold? Okay. With these aspects in mind, main difference between a compressor and a limiter will be that on the ratio, the 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 10-to-1, we have left 10-to-1 and now we're above 10-to-1. So now we're 11-to-1 all the way to infinity to 1. So basically, a limiter is a brick wall. Once we hit this, we do not go higher than this. Okay? So think of a limiter that way. Now, obviously, a compressor would be more on the front line, more of a quick musical shaping of your sound, to where a limiter is your final line. More than likely you would use that on buses, on your masters. We're not even going to get to that yet, but just so you get a rough idea. But a limiter itself is going to have the same knobs on it, whether it's a plug-in or whether it's a real piece of outboard gear. You're going to see the same thing. You're going to see threshold, you're going to see ratio, you're going to see attack, you're going to see release, and you probably will see some other aspects. You might see like a knee on there, and then the ability to side chain that and perhaps turn either one into a frequency dependent compressor or a frequency dependent limiter, which basically means that might be a little overwhelming, but basically if you wanted to turn either one of those pieces of gear into suppressing a specific frequency and not the overall track. Maybe I got ahead of myself. Maybe that's a little more advanced in the techniques of recording and stuff, but I just wanted to throw it out there, because like I told you, I don't got a script or nothing. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, and I'm trying to educate you and also, trying to entertain you. Okay, with those same aspects in mind, we can also cover gates. Gates are just what they sound like a gate on a fence. The gate is open, stuff can come through. The gate is closed, nothing will come through. You'll probably use gates a lot on drums. And the same thing is threshold. When I hit this certain volume, the gate opens. When I leave this volume, the threshold, when I leave this volume, the gate closes. So for example, a great place to put it would be on your drums. So whether it's your kick or, snare, toms. And you know what? I'll put an example. Okay, here we go. Here's a kick with no gate. Give it to him. Cool. All right. Now here's a kick with a gate. Now, if you notice, the main difference is now something is opening and closing, only allowing the kick sound to come through, and everything else is gone. Now it's going to have the same principles. Threshold, when do I start working? Attack, how quickly do you want me to open this gate? Release, how quickly do you want me to close this gate? So a lot of these aspects that we're talking about are gonna transfer from device to device. So when you see threshold, when you see ratio, when you see attack, when you see release, you kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. All right, guys. I mean, this is just the basics. We're just getting into this. I'm trying to keep these episodes about 30 minutes long so they're not overwhelming. But there you go. Outboard gear versus plugins, EQs, whether they're real or they're in a plugin version, reverbs, delays, compressions, gates. That's what this is all about. And again, let me stress the cost saving and the hoarding that can happen. Oh my God. I know we tend to, especially when it comes to plugins, I've seen a lot of engineers start to hoard plugins. And man, I've done it myself. I've been that guy. I jump on and, ooh, I need that plugin. Ooh, I need that reverb. Ooh, I need that compression. Oh, I need this. Hey, Waves has got this new plugin. I gotta have it. Black Salt has got this new gate. I gotta get it. Eddie Kramer's got a new one out, Marroquin has a new one out, and before you know it, you got 200 EQs and 200 compressors and all kinds of stuff, and you pull down your plugins and you have page upon page upon page of plugins, and then you know what winds up happening? You wind up using 5, your 5 favorite, your 10 favorites, and you spend all that time, and yeah, it's great to try different things. I feel like you lose yourself and you get away from the project and you lose your train of focus trying to try all these different EQs and compressors when you kind of find one that works for you and you stick with it and you go. So just a little advice, guys, be careful with the hoarding of stuff. And same thing with outboard gear. All right, guys, we covered. Man, I feel like these 30 minutes just flew by. Okay, on this next one, we'll keep going. On the next one, we'll get into a little more advanced techniques of how we can actually use some of this equipment. All right, guys, thank you for joining me. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this was a lot to throw at you. If you're some veterans out there, I'm more than sure you probably rolled your eyes at a couple of things that I said. But if you're a beginner and you're just starting, I wish I had heard this when I had started. Okay? Hang in there, guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for coming back.
We're ticking clock.